Welcome to part 3 of the Twiglet Zone. Fantastical stories accompanied by a savory snack. Welcome back to the Twiglet Zone. We're going to start off with a brief recap of parts 1 and 2 of the mysteries of the pyramids. We talked about how the psychic powers and harmonics were used by priests back in the day to both quarry the stone and to levitate the stone across the desert to the pyramids, and then use the same power in order to levitate the stones into a very exact position. We mentioned about sound energy and the fact that it is way more powerful than we would give it credit for in our modern society. It can be used for many things and has been used for many things over many civilizations, including the ability to make the visible invisible. And that's one thing we covered off with regards to the Harry Potter's Cloak of Invisibility. How could that be possible? Surely that's just fantasy. It's only a question of manipulating energy frequency, because we know that we are just energy vibrating at a very specific frequency. So what we need to do is find a mathematical equation that makes any one object tick. And then you manipulate that energy frequency beyond the range of our human senses. So just because we can't see it or hear it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I also resolved the age-old mystery of the Mayans, who disappeared in 1441, since which time the historians have puzzled over this for many, many generations. Well, finally, the problem is resolved. We know what the answer is, and you're welcome. They simply transcended. They were very deeply spiritual people, and they were able to raise their frequency to take them beyond the third dimensional realm in which we exist to the fifth dimensional realm, or whichever realm it was that took them beyond our range of senses. So they still exist, but there were no bodies. There was no trace of them. You could just see the civilization that they'd left behind. You could see the buildings, you could see the pyramids. But the mystery was, where had they gone to? So now you know they had actually transcended to a higher level. So getting back to the pyramids. As we said, the priests used the psychic powers and harmonics to levitate and to build those pyramids and to quarry the pyramids. During the process, they would imprint their energy into each individual stone. And it's amazing to think that you can imprint energy within stones and within rock faces. And in fact, that's been used in the past. It may sound a little bit strange, but this is the Twiglet Zone after all. But going back into past civilizations, there were certain areas of rock faces where the shamans or the witch doctors, or whatever you want to call the spiritual leader, would imprint healing energies actually into the rocks themselves. And these would become healing areas. So rather than going to your NHS doctor, you'd go off to the rock face and you'd meditate, and you would pass your energy into the rocks, and it would bring forth the healing that you required. So when the priests built the pyramids, they imprinted their energy within the stones. And therefore, what you get with a pyramid is all these blocks of imprinted human energy, which creates the most concentrated area of human energy on the planet. And if you ever have the privilege of actually entering the pyramids, you may well feel this. Now, it all depends, because not everybody gets this. For some people, they would just go in there and it would feel just like a walk in the park, very interesting, but that's the end of it. But for others, you may have an experience which is difficult to explain. And that's because this imprinted human energy will resonate at a certain level. It may be resonating more with your subconscious than your conscious, but you'll know there's something going on. And sometimes wisdom can be passed on if mentally you're in the right space, because you have to have an open mind, open heart, heart-based consciousness, and be resonating at the right level. And then you can actually receive a download into your subconscious memories that can pass on a great deal of wisdom. Now, it may not be instantly accessible, but maybe at some point in the future, when that wisdom is called for, you might suddenly find that you know an awful lot more than you thought you did. So it sounds strange, but that is the way that it works. Now, curses. We've all heard of the curses associated with the Egyptian pyramids. Going into certain places, certain people have very bad luck. They die soon afterwards in a horrible accident or whatever it is. Well, there are no curses. That's the first thing. It comes down to people who cannot balance these specific energies. These are very psychic areas, but you have to be attuned to receive them. You have to be open, as I said, mind and heart consciousness. The pyramids are effectively a litmus test as to the knowledge of the generation that created them. Until we know as much as they did, we will not be ready to receive and comprehend the whole truth behind these higher order realities. Okay, so from where did this wisdom originate? Well, it was past civilizations. It had been passed down from past civilizations of both Atlantis and of the even more ancient civilization of Lemuria. They were both destroyed ultimately in cataclysms, but they were around for many, many thousands of years. They were the keepers of the knowledge. And some of the keepers of the knowledge actually survived the cataclysms and were able to pass it down through successive generations. But they were very careful about who received this knowledge, because you had to be ready to receive this knowledge. As we know in the modern era, often when you get powerful knowledge, the first thing a government wants to do is to weaponize it and use it to control other people. The keepers of the wisdom were wise enough to realize that you had to pass it to people who would act responsibly with this information. It wasn't passed to anybody. Those priests who learned this to build those Egyptian pyramids had been schooled in this from a very young age. It wasn't the kind of thing you could learn overnight. And then, of course, there was the influence and knowledge brought by the extraterrestrials. So, I mean, you didn't think we were here in this universe alone, did you? No, I mean, I think most people probably realize we're not. Well, the fact is we're not. We're surrounded by the ETs all the time, but they are beyond our spectrum of visibility, of sight. Anyway, that's all for a future Twiglet Zone. So until next time, when we expand on these truths, I think that's going to be it for the Twiglet Zone this time around. On a parting note, I'd be obliged if you would vote 1 to 5 on our Twiglet Zone deluded-ometer. If you believe what I say to be the truth, you would score it a 1. If you believed it to be deluded nonsense, you would score it a 5, or somewhere in between. I will leave it with you, and I'll be delighted to hear back from you. Thank you. This is John Drew from Elevated Planet, bringing you part 3 of the Twiglet Zone.